Hello, my name is Jenna Norton, and I wrote my capstone inquiry project on the needs of gifted students. Identity statement, passions, and knowledge. My identity statement reads as follows. I associate my identity as an educator with the way I was treated during my time as a student. I started school in Southtown San Antonio, but moved to Schertz in the second grade. I was also put in the gifted and talented program in kindergarten. Because I started my schooling in Southtown, which is an inner city low income area, I then moved to a suburb called Schertz, which is a very upper middle class suburban neighborhood. So I saw both ends of the spectrum when surveying my peers and the situations that we were put in and the learning environment. This led to a more well-rounded view of the school system as I was able to see kind of both ends of that spectrum. My passions. My passions revolve around equitable treatment for students in every aspect. This includes socially and academically. My passions again stem a lot from my diverse viewpoint as a student. I was able to see a lot of different personality types and individual identities within my peers. So socially, I see a lot of strength in students that are able to be themselves, and I will always be someone in the classroom that will support that type of expression. I will always hope that my students feel open coming to me, and I will always want to support them in any way that I can in that aspect so that they feel supported socially. But I also feel that it is so important to academically support my students in their differences as well as their similarities to their peers. That goes into my knowledge. My knowledge on this topic takes into account many personal experiences as a student, but also considers the viewpoints of others that have been in both similar and different situations. This touches on my ability to consider the viewpoint of not only the gifted students, but also the lower performing students, the more high need students, and also take into account the perspective of teachers when writing curriculum and thinking of plans for differentiation for gifted students. I'm aware that it's not always easy to support every student, but I also feel that it is still very important to support students, whether they are low performing, high performing, wherever they are on the spectrum. Every student needs differentiated support, and they need the support that they need in that moment immediately. There is never going to be a reason that a student shouldn't deserve special, specific support for their situation. That follows with my research questions. My first research question is, do schools give gifted students as much attention and support as they do the general student population? I asked this question because I felt that when using these questions, I was going to interview my former peers who were also gifted students in school that have graduated now. So I felt that it was important to ask their opinion of how they felt when in the school system. I felt that it was important to my research because first-person accounts of gifted students are important in the development of different solves to issues that we can then put into practice in our schools. My second research question is, what can districts and schools do to help with the issues gifted students face? I felt that this was really important, again, to ask former gifted students because everyone has different needs and different viewpoints. So asking some of my peers as well as putting some of my own input into the answer, I felt that it would be a pretty well-rounded solution or a start to finding a solution. When asking students that have been through the issues what they felt could have improved their experience, we often see answers that will be given by students that are in the same footsteps as we were. So that can essentially, hopefully, nip it in the bud before it gets as bad as it has been for myself and my peers. Research question number 3, how can gifted students combat the issues that they face later on in life? I felt that this research question was very important because a lot of gifted students are already done or almost done with schooling. So the issues are already there and they're pretty irrevocable, and there's not a lot that we can do to rectify that situation other than finding other outlets that they can use. I felt that this was important when writing this paper because I wanted to address all aspects of being a gifted student, not just the actively being a gifted student portion of it. You're not always going to be a student in the traditional sense. So at a certain point, you have to find other outlets to solve these issues because you won't have the support that you had in the school system once you're in the real world, in your career field, and such situations. My purpose of study. My purpose in conducting this study was to create awareness surrounding the disparities in treatment between gifted and general population students. Though this treatment may usually be unintentionally unfair and misguided, it is something that must be rectified to ensure the most universal success among our student populations. I felt that my purpose of study, again, revolved a lot around righting the wrongs that aren't intentional but are still present. We often tend, as educators, myself included, tend to focus most of our attention on the more high need students. So, for example, our speech issue students, our dyslexic students, our low performing students, those students need a lot of attention, but we still need to remember that even our high gifted students need our attention and need our differentiated instruction so that they feel just as supported as the lower performing students. When they're not given the support that they need, they often lose their motivation to perform well because they don't feel that anyone is recognizing their success anyway. Literature review. I chose a few quotes from the scholarly articles that I used for my research for my literature review. I felt that I pulled quotes from each of the main aspects of my research, and I will read them to you now. The first quote reads, "Many teachers report being extroverts. It is very difficult for an extrovert to understand an introvert. Therefore, the teacher may see the introverted student as someone with a problem, not as simply someone with a different personality type. This may lead to attempts to get them to be friendlier or to work in larger groups, to talk more often and more spontaneously, and to be more outgoing and interactive." I felt that this was a very important quote because a lot of teachers don't think about the fact that just because a student is a high performer and knows much of the content doesn't mean that they are comfortable sharing that knowledge in front of a large group of people. Oftentimes, teachers assume that high-performing students that are comfortable with the curriculum are also comfortable sharing their viewpoints because they know that they're comfortable with their viewpoints. This is not always the case. Oftentimes, teachers end up putting gifted students into uncomfortable situations because they rely heavily on them for correct answers or motivation for their peers when this is not always fair. Teachers sometimes need to realize that different personality types exist and we have to cater to those personality types instead of putting our students into uncomfortable situations that can lead to resentment or burnout. The second quote that I chose reads, "A total instructional program for gifted readers emphasizes various aspects in different subject areas, but vocabulary development, advanced reading skills, and literature are suggested for special attention for gifted readers, since growth in these areas can produce intellectual rewards for the gifted." In a simpler context, this quote says that giving the gifted students the tools that they need to succeed will help them succeed later on in life. This is something that seems pretty self-explanatory, but often is not put into practice. Again, like I've said before, oftentimes gifted students are brushed to the side and just given extra work that this teacher knows will give them little practice, but they'll know how to complete it. This oftentimes leads gifted students to not get the fundamental strategies that are usually taught to students that need help with the tools to succeed rather than just being expected to succeed. This can be seen in many gifted students not having study skills or not having time management skills because they never needed to learn them in their early education and then didn't know how to learn them later on in their educational careers. The next quote reads, "In too many school settings, little differentiation of curriculum and instruction for gifted students is provided during the school day, and minimal opportunities are offered." This, again, leans into the fact that a lot of curriculum is, again, very generalized, and I think that it would be very helpful, and a lot of studies that I read also show that it would be helpful for there to be a differentiated curriculum for the gifted students that follows the same TEKS and the same timeline, but has more challenging or more diverse content. That way, the students stay on the same pace as their peers and are able to still learn the same fundamental skills as their peers, but don't feel so outcasted that they're completing their work super quickly or are understanding everything faster than everyone else. The last quote reads, "Poor self-esteem, externalized loci of control, high levels of state and trait anxiety, poor school life quality, and tedium were significant predictors of classroom stress. These plus classroom stressors also predicted classroom burnout." This quote leans heavily into the social effects of gifted students not being given the attention that they deserve. Often they are outcast because they are put into their own little group and they're given their own work because they finish faster, and it kind of secludes them from their peers. This causes a lot of issues socially with communication skills and just like social awareness skills that can be, again, addressed by keeping them with the full group and just differentiating their specific workload. Methods and data sources. My first method of acquiring data was through scholarly articles. As I said before, I used a lot of scholarly articles that were written both by educators and by former and current gifted students. Pulling data from actual gifted students was very beneficial for me. I was able to see the viewpoints of different gifted students from all over the country that are from different socioeconomic communities. And I was just able to get a very well-rounded viewpoint from the gifted students as well as from educators on the other end of the river. Method number 2, my second method used to acquire data was through peer interviews. I chose to interview, like I said before, a couple of my peers that are previously gifted students in school. I chose this because I felt that getting the viewpoints of my peers that grew up in different situations or had different experiences in school but were still considered gifted students, classified as gifted students, would give me, again, a well-rounded viewpoint from the side of the gifted student. Findings and implications. I found findings for all 3 of my research questions, mainly from a couple of the scholarly articles, but also heavily drew my findings from the interviews that I conducted. I felt that they were very beneficial for my research. They were very extensive answers given, and they were similar answers to each other and to myself. So the first finding is gifted students are often brushed aside to create more space to support their high-need peers. This leaves a disparity in fundamental support for gifted students. I found that both of my peers, as well as a lot of the scholarly articles, found that they had the same experience I did. They were not taught a lot of the fundamental strategies and tools that you need later on in life when curriculum gets more difficult and complex, so that they weren't able to solve problems that weren't immediately apparent to have a solution. Gifted students are often used to looking at a problem and immediately knowing the answer or immediately knowing how to solve it. And when we get into higher education, it gets very difficult to figure out how to solve these problems because we were not given the fundamental skills needed to solve more complex problems. The second finding was districts and schools can help these students by designing GT-specific curriculum plans. Lessons and curriculum that follow the same TEKS but at a level of complexity that keeps gifted students challenged and on the same timeline as their peers. This was another finding that I found in both the articles and with my peers. My peers were more of a broad suggestion that maybe more complex or more well thought out work would have kept them busy for longer and would have kept them on the same timeline. But I also found that a lot of the scholarly articles mentioned the need for differentiated instruction for gifted students. They need to be taught things in a more complex way. They need to be on the same timeline as their peers so that they still have that camaraderie and they still learn those fundamental skills that they need later on in life. The final finding was gifted students that have made it through their schooling can supplement the skills they lack by seeking alternative solutions or finding masterclass style learning opportunities to strengthen the skills needed later in life that were missed in their developmental years of school. This finding was catered more towards the students that are already finished with school or close to being finished with school, that are at the point in their careers or in their educational careers where they can't go back in time. They can't be taught these skills from the jump, from their early developmental years, but they can supplement that missed knowledge by finding other outlets such as master classes or going to trusted peers that didn't have the same experience, that can help them develop these skills or similar skills to supplement the ones that they missed out on during school. Although this is not ideal, and we hope to take it on at the source for the incoming students, there is not always the ability to do that, and the students that have already missed the opportunity still need an outlet. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Jenna Norton. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.